I will say that we are here with Wilma Stevens. I am Catherine Mouton, and this is an interview being conducted for the Chicago Area Women's History Council on April 28th, 2013, in Logan Square, Chicago, Illinois. And Wilma was an activist for the Chicago women's movement, beginning with her move to Chicago in 1972, and is still currently very active within the Chicago community. And we're going to go ahead and review some biographical information. And what year were you born again, Wilma?
1948.
And where were you born?
I was born in Frederick, Maryland.
And where did you grow up?
I grew up in Myersville, Maryland, which is about 3 miles from the Appalachian Trail in western Maryland.
And your father's place of birth?
Is Newmarket, Maryland.
And where was your mother's place of birth?
Clarksville, Arkansas.
And Wilma, tell me again, how did you get your name?
I have my parents' middle names. My mother's actually is not her middle name. Her first name was Wilma. Her middle name is Evelyn. She never used Wilma, so I got Wilma, and because her father was William. And my father's middle name was Theodore because his father was Theodore, so my middle name is Theodora.
And describe again your favorite childhood memory.
My favorite childhood memory is playing wagon train with my neighbor kids. I was hoping to come up with another one. We would go all over the neighborhood and pretend that we were parts of wagon trains. Westerns were very big on TV when we were little kids, so we played that a lot. And I also have memories of making my own dolls out of weird little things. I made an entire set of dolls out of safety pins, which were very strange. But I spent a lot of time playing by myself as well as with the other kids. So I like to create little things like that.
So art and creativity were very present when you were already younger, and that was also because your father and your mother were artists.
Right.
And yes. Tell me your father's occupation.
My father's occupation was an engineering technician. He was basically an engineering draftsman for medical laboratories. But his real calling was as an artist, as a graphic artist. He did a lot of silkscreen printing. He did ceramics and did some very inventive wood carving. Plus, he made furniture, and he built our house. So, and actually, he and my mother built the house. So he always had something to do. I think that was a really good role model for me. That there was work, and then there was one's creative life, and that they were both important.
And your mother's occupation was?
My mother was a bookkeeper and a homemaker. And when she retired, she became a quilter and a weaver. And in fact, I have the loom that my father made for my mother 30 years ago.
Wow.
So one of these days I'm going to be a weaver too.
But you already weave now.
I do some, but when I retire, I'm actually going to spend more time weaving.
It's wonderful. And describe your family home for me.
My family home, well, I'll start with the building. My parents did build it. They bought this land in this very tiny town that's basically a street long with two little streets sticking out from it. And at the end of one of the side streets was this wonderful plot of land that had 2 maple trees on it. And it had been part of an old farm. And when they bought the land, the owner took them around and took them right to that spot and says, "This is where you want to build your house." So they built the house there themselves. They did it on weekends and evenings, and it took them several years, but they got the house put together. And it's still, not just standing, but square. They did an extremely good job of it. And so we grew up in this house, and we could look out the front door and see hills and trees and cows, and looked out the back and we could see hills and trees and cows. It's really beautiful rolling country. So this little street here was overlooking a great deal of it. And at night, could walk outside and see the Milky Way, and the air was beautifully clear, and the water was clean, and it was a great spot to be.
Wow. And where did you attend your grammar school?
My grammar school was right across the street, and had started out as a 4-room schoolhouse, and then they finally built an addition onto it when I was about the 3rd grade, and it was great, because before then the classes didn't all have their own room, and we finally this sounds terribly rustic. We each class had their own classroom, and that was very nice, and a library and some other things. So that was great addition.
And who was your favorite teacher?
My favorite teacher was definitely my favorite teacher in high school was my Latin teacher. She also taught world history, but she was just a very smart, funny lady, and really liked her.
And she's who you most looked up to in high school?
I think so, yes, absolutely.
And what dreams or goals did you have as a teenager?
Well, I started out wanting to be a Latin teacher, and actually at one point I also wanted to teach sign language. We had a friend who taught at the Maryland School for the Deaf, and I was thinking about that for a while, but I really wanted to be an artist, and I had my father as a role model, and I just wanted to do creative work for a living, and I think that finally gelled when I was about 15, and then I was really more ready, had a more direct goal at that point.
And becoming an art teacher for you was not something that you particularly wanted to?
I thought it was probably the best way to become an artist, and certainly most of the artists who earned a living as artists were art teachers. But it was such a small town. I didn't see people making a living painting or sculpting or even going to art shows and selling things. That just wasn't anything that I had seen. So that was just a lack of experience. I didn't know really what was out there.
And what was your first job?
My first job was babysitting. And it was all right. I don't think I was particularly good at it. Nobody got hurt under my watch, but no, I really wasn't that crazy about it. But I did that, and I did a little tutoring when I was in college, and but mostly it was babysitting and taking care of things. There really weren't any place to go. There was no way to get to jobs. I didn't have a car, and we didn't think about that sort of thing.
Tell me more about that. Why didn't you think you were a good babysitter?
Oh, I didn't have much patience. There are a lot of things that come out of babies that I just didn't want to deal with.
I understand.
I did have fun one summer taking care of a 2-year-old, but the 2-year-old was a little more lively and just more interaction than babies. And I was always short too, and sometimes I was trying to take care of kids who were taller than I was, and they simply weren't going to listen to me. So it just wasn't a great favorite. It wasn't what I wanted to do.
When did you first become aware of sexuality?
At different times. I mean, it's a discovery for everybody, I guess, but my mother had a baby when I was 8, so I understood where babies came from, more or less. I hit puberty when I was 10, and that was a big shock. But it was a time a way for my mother to explain more of the facts of life to me. Had my first boyfriend when I was 6, and got my first kiss when I was 6. So I'm not sure that that's really being aware of your sexuality, but it's certainly something on the path. I don't know that I ever got really great information till you'll get a little bit here and a little bit there. I don't think my mother's instruction was really that complete as far as some parts of sexuality is concerned, but I think she did her best, but I think she wasn't really that comfortable with explaining a lot of detail.
And so you were never really taught about sex in a very direct way?
Not really, no.
Did who taught you about menstruation?
That was my mother, and that she was very good at. But that's because I started when I was 10, and it was a shock. I had no idea what was going on, and she explained all of that to me. And there were some little booklets and things one could get, but normally, and actually, I think at school there was some health instruction, but all that was to come later. And I was only 10, and that no one was going to give that kind of instruction in school at that point. So my mother did see me through that particular thing. Right. Yeah.
And I'm sorry, was your sisters? How many siblings?
I had 3 siblings, 2 brothers and 1 sister.
Okay.
And my older brother died, about 12 years ago. And I still have a younger sister and a younger brother.
Younger sister and a younger brother.
Yeah.
And your brother who passed, I'm very sorry to hear about that. And was he older? Or?
He was older. He was 2 years older.
2 years older.
Yes, we were, he was the first, and then I was 2 years after him, and my sister was 3 years later, and then my younger brother was 5 years later after her.
Okay.
So he was the baby that my mother had when I was 8.
Okay, so you were the first female to also go through menstruation and early. Was your sister also early, or?
No, she wasn't as early as I was.
Okay.
So I'm not sure exactly when, but I think hers was a little bit later.
Okay. And what was your first experience with sexism?
Sexism, oh yes. I think the first real experience was when I was in 6th grade, and our teacher, who was also the principal of the school, decided that the young women could not play baseball during recess. And the only explanation we got was that it was not ladylike. This was the first time someone told me I couldn't do something because it wasn't ladylike. And it was really unfortunate, because we had all this energy, but a bunch of 11-year-olds had energy, and before he had made this decision, the boys played baseball on one diamond and the girls would play baseball on another diamond. So it's not like we were playing baseball with the boys, but we were playing in skirts. Young women were not allowed to wear slacks to school in those days. So, but anything we did that was active, we had skirts on. And so I don't know that playing baseball was anything worse than anything else we were doing, but he had the idea that what we were going to do during recess was stand around and cheer on the boys. And I think, in retrospect, I think it's a terrible thing to do to young women, both to not give them something active to do, and to make it clear that their role was simply to stand there and watch boys do something important, or just do something. And I still, unfortunately, that man passed away before I could go back as an adult and tell him what a really stupid thing he had done. Because I'm hoping that he didn't do that to any other class, because I just felt it was such a bad message to give to a bunch of young women, especially 11-year-old, and you're just getting into puberty. You're confused enough as it is, and what an awful message. So that was the first.
Well, hopefully that message changed with Title IX.
I hope so. Yes.
Why did you choose to attend the Maryland Institute School of Art?
Well, I liked the school. I wanted to go to art school, and my father had been the same school that my father went to, and I, went down, looked at the school, and I was very excited about it. I was very excited about the idea of living in a city, wanted to, be in Baltimore, and that was mostly my choice. Was that I knew something about the school because he'd been there. Of course, he was there in 1936 to 38, so it wasn't exactly exactly the same place, but I was excited both for the fact that it had a connection with him and that it was a good art school, and that's what I wanted to do.
How did your parents feel about you attending college? Your mother's father was against it. I think this was in the previous.
Right. Yes. My folks were thrilled. They because my mother's father was against it. She was very determined that both my sister and I go to school, and my sister and I were better students than my brothers. My sister being the better student of the two of us, but they were very, very supportive of the fact that I wanted to have a career in art. My father was really thrilled, especially, and they I couldn't have had more supportive parents. I think that was very, very important to me, that they were excited about the possibilities of me going as much as I was.
I was going to ask you what made you choose a degree in graphic design, but it is because of the influence from your father and just something that was very natural for you.
Well, that's part of it. I think there were several things. I never was a painter, and I really was not, or a sculptor. I think I really did want to find a way to earn a living. Although I don't know that I was that. When I first went to art school, that I was really thinking, I've got to come out of here with a job, because that's just not it. But I liked the problem-solving aspect of graphic design. It's like any other kind of design work. You have a problem. You want to put forth a certain message, and you want it to be effective, or clever, or just lovely. And the fact that there were a lot of ways to do it. Originally I thought I was going to go into advertising, because I thought that was what graphic design was. I was very happy to find that there were many other areas besides advertising, because advertising would not have been a good fit for me. But originally I was going to be an art teacher, and I'd already decided by the time I went to the Maryland Institute that I did not want to be an art teacher. And graphic design just appealed to me on a lot of different levels, and my father's experience was a help, but I think it was just a really good fit for me.
Yes. Were there any artists, or was there any art specifically within the graphic design realm, or any other artists that were very influential to you, or?
Well, there were. We could see people's work. I can't think of anyone that stands out as a particular influence for me at this point. No, I just don't think of anyone particular there that I could that I would point to.
Was there anyone, any authors that you like to read in college, or any books that really stood out for you?
Okay, let me think. Mostly what I remember were my college English classes. I mean, the Maryland Institute has, at that point, had an extremely basic degree program. I mean, it was really very focused on art classes, but you had enough English and history, so you get your degree. And I had a wonderful English teacher my first freshman year who introduced me to T.S. Eliot, and I remember reading the love song of J. Alfred Prufrock, which was wonderful, and quite a number of others. But mostly what we studied that year was poetry, and that's one of the few that stand out. Some E.E. Cummings, and as far as other authors, we spend most of our time reading art history. So right. Yeah, there weren't a lot at that point. we were introduced to a lot of Shakespeare, which was great. I took a good Shakespeare class, and there were opportunities to go to Shakespeare plays
in Baltimore.
In Baltimore, and they made some very good student deals. So we really got some great opportunities. So that's where I really got my love of Shakespeare, was in college.
That's wonderful. Any musicians or bands that was music a big part, or?
Oh, sure. We had a lot of rock musicians coming through. The only one I remember, though, which I know nothing about this group other than the fact that we got to hear them, was the Fugs. And I only remember that because there was some program, and I ended up, one of them came and sat next to me, next to one of the Fugs. I wouldn't recognize them if I tripped over them in an alley. So it was rock and roll time. So most of the music we listened to was some form of rock and roll. But the Baltimore Symphony offered greatly discounted tickets to students for the Maryland Institute. So that was my introduction, not my introduction to symphony music. I'd heard some in high school, once a year or something, but had a wonderful opportunity to go over to the Symphony Hall and hear some wonderful opera singers and some wonderful soloists that I really treasure a lot of those memories too. So
that's great. Where did you live in college? Who did you live with?
I had two roommates. Well, the first year I was there, I lived in a home for girls. Mm-hmm. I think it was really called a home for girls. I don't think it was young women. It was a residence for students for the Maryland Institute and the Peabody Conservatory. So it was musicians and artists. And the musicians made a great deal of noise, and the artists stunk up the place with oil paint and everything else. So we weren't exactly the most congenial group, but I mean they were nice enough. But we were greatly outnumbered by the musicians. Mm-hmm. But it was a safe place, in the city for an introduction, to living in the city. The Maryland Institute did not have dormitories. It didn't really have a campus. It was just several buildings in the middle of the city, and most students had apartments around there. So after that first year, I found roommates, and we lived in one apartment in my my sophomore year, and then we moved to another apartment where I was for my junior and senior years.
Very nice. And what did you do after graduation?
I looked for jobs around home because I didn't have any money to move anywhere. I found one job for the Washington County educational system that had a TV teaching set up, and I think I was there for a month before I got another job working for the library system doing displays, and it was fine. I got to do some creative things, but it was really not what I wanted to do. Mm-hmm. And I was very fortunate to have done some work in college, and maybe this answers your other question about books. I had done a series of illustrations for Lauren Isley's The Immense Journey. So yes, I guess there's an author that did impress me. And one of my instructors remembered those pieces and met up with an art director from the World Book Publishing. At that point, it was Field Enterprises Educational Publishing. Okay. But they made World Book Encyclopedia, and they made a science yearbook and a current affairs yearbook. And they were looking for someone to work on the science yearbook. And just luck that my teacher talked to this art director and said he knew someone who would be interested. And my instructor got in touch with me, and then I got in touch with the people from Field Enterprises. And they weren't able to hire me right away or even bring me out for an interview, but eventually I got out there for an interview and got hired. So that's how I ended up coming to Chicago.
what did you do in Kentucky shortly before moving to Chicago?
Oh, I worked for the Army Materiel Command.
And what year was that?
That would have been 1971.
Mm-hmm.
I had taken the civil service test because I wanted to work at the U.S. Park Service Graphics Division, which had a beautiful new building they had just opened up in Harpers Ferry, West Virginia. And I had interviewed there and really, really wanted to work there. And in preparation for that, I had to take a civil service test. So the Park Service were hiring people who'd had a lot more experience than I had, certainly. But I'd taken the civil service test, and I was offered a job working in Fort Knox, Kentucky, for the Army Materiel Command. And they had a magazine telling people how to take care of their radios and their tanks and helicopters and anything else. And I didn't necessarily want to work for the Army. I wasn't that political, but I really wanted a job, and I really needed to. It's not that I needed to move out of the house. It was time to grow up and move on. So I was offered a job, and it just seemed like a chance to go do something. So I moved to Radcliffe, Kentucky, and took this job at Fort Knox. And it was a very interesting life experience. Not a great job, but it was, as far as moving out of the house, moving somewhere where I knew absolutely no one, and learning to survive. I was very shy, so having to get to know people, having to move out of myself a little bit was a very invaluable life experience.
And then shortly after that, you went from Kentucky to Chicago. And that was in 1972.
Right.
And you moved there because the job opportunity is originally what brought you to Chicago?
Yes.
All right. And was there ever a time, and this was, I think, in college with your college boyfriend, where you almost married? Or why didn't you?
Why didn't I marry my college boyfriend? Oh, he had real control issues. I had a friendship with this young man, and he seemed to have a good sense of humor, and he was a nice enough guy. But when we started dating, it was pretty clear that he had some serious control issues. I think there were several things. First of all, he made it very clear that his work was important and my work was less important. He would get irritated at me if I didn't stop what I was doing in the middle of class and come over and schmooze with him a little bit, because girlfriends were supposed to do that, whereas I was working on my own work and I was intent, and he certainly wasn't coming over interrupting his work to talk to me, but he felt that I should interrupt my work to go talk to him. I remember visiting his house. He lived with his parents. He had this studio in the basement. It was very nice. I remember looking around the studio, and I picked up what I think it was a bottle of ink, looked at it, put it back down, and I didn't put it back down in exactly the same spot he'd had it, and he reached right over. He glared at me and then reached right over and moved it back about, a half an inch or an inch. And I realized that he had some real problems, and that this was not going to be my life partner. So that didn't go anywhere. I think I broke up with him not too long after that. But he really had some other control issues. He had a very, very strict ideas of what he thought girlfriends were supposed to do, and I wasn't living up to my role there, and I just decided it wasn't worth living up to it. So that was the end of that.
Who else did you fall in love with?
Let me see. I dated a number of people. The last person with whom I was serious was a gentleman that I worked with who had been recently divorced. And I realized after dating him for a while that he He had too many issues from the divorce. He wasn't quite over the divorce yet, and it might have worked out at another time, but it was definitely, that was the wrong time. He just wasn't. It wasn't like he was ready to commit. I think he was a little lost, and it was just not. It was not going to be a good time. But he liked opera, so and I liked opera. We had a lot. We had a lot in common, but just was the wrong time, I think.
You told me in our first meeting, and this stuck with me, the women's movement happened to me.
Yes.
I like that. Could you describe that feeling to me again?
Oh, yes. The first time I went to, well, actually, when I found out about the Chicago chapter of the National Organization for Women was the day I started working at Field Enterprises. I met Mary Ann Lupa, who was the president of the chapter at that time. She had been hired about 2 weeks before I had. And actually, I booted her out of my office, so to speak. She had been working in the office I was to have and had to move somewhere else. But we did get to talking, and I went with her to a meeting, and I came in February. I think I went to my first meeting of Chicago Now in March, and then I joined in April. And what struck me was just the intelligence and professionalism and wonderful talent of this group of women who just all impressed me so much, bowled me over quite a bit, actually. When you don't see a lot of women in leadership in your job or in other parts of your life, and then walk into a room and just see all these women getting all this work done and speaking so forcefully about issues and so passionately about issues and trying to do something about those issues, that's why I say it happened to me, because that really bowled me over. I was completely enchanted with the possibilities.
What were the issues that, from your first few experiences with Now, that really resonated with you, or things that they were bringing up in the meetings?
Mostly employment. There was the Equal Rights Amendment had just been passed in Congress, so that whole campaign was just beginning, and I think I don't remember if it passed in March or February, but it was right then. I mean, it was that year.
Yes, it was 1972.
1972. So that was an immediate issue, and also everyone was very excited and very up about the possibility. I don't think anyone knew how incredibly difficult the fight was going to be, but right at that moment, they were very, very excited. There were some health issues. But for me, it was mostly the employment possibilities. I remember there were some women who'd come to the meeting to talk about not being able to get not alimony, but child support. There were a number of women who were having a great deal of trouble getting child support, and they were trying to get the courts to be more active with giving them child support. Now, that was not an issue that hit me, but the idea that a group could do something about something like that was very, very appealing.
How did the participation with the movement impact your transition into Chicago?
Oh, it was wonderful. It was like finding a family in a lot of ways. Because I knew no one, it was a wonderful way to meet people, and to meet people that believed in things I believed in. Even if I didn't quite know how to express them, I realized these were the things I believed in. And as I said, smart people, educated women. Um, One of the things that I found most appealing about NOW was that there were a lot of women who were terribly underused
Mm-hmm.
in their jobs, and were using or taking advantage of these opportunities to learn new skills that for many of them they were able to use on their jobs. That was true for me too. My job included making presentations, and I learned a great deal about standing up in front of groups by participating in NOW, and that was very, very valuable for me. Just even getting the confidence to stand up and talk in front of a group, or hearing your voice over a microphone, which can be very startling first time you do that, and then getting used to that and getting to enjoy. I won't say enjoy the power of it, but to becoming more comfortable with being able to do that. And especially if you're shy, like I was, it was wonderful. It was a great training.
Well, you joined now in April of 1972, and within a year you were elected vice president.
That's true.
Yes, so that was quite a change.
It was quite a change. Partly because I was willing to do it, but also because I was encouraged to do so by some very strong ladies that I appreciated and that I respected, and I was glad that they saw the possibilities in me.
What was the election process like? What was it within the organization? Was the vice president elected every year, or?
They tried to keep a group of officers for 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
The idea, I think, as is in many cases, is that the vice president would eventually be the president.
Mm-hmm.
Let me see now. I joined in 72. I actually, 70. I was elected in 73.
Mm-hmm.
And served 2 years as vice president, and then got elected president in 75. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that was pretty quick. It was really a year and a half. It was, because I joined in April and then I got elected in the September. So that was really a year and a half.
Okay.
But at that point, I really felt like I had grown tremendously as just as a person and experiencing these different areas, and even being willing to take on something like this. It's not something I would have ever dreamed of doing when I first walked into that meeting room.
Was there any relationship with the Chicago Now organization and the Chicago Women's Liberation Union?
No,
not
I think
really.
We knew of each other, but it was a different focus.
Yeah. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And what was Women Employed?
Women Employed was a group started by a couple of women working out of the University of Chicago, I think, who wanted to put together an organization that focused strictly on employment issues for women. And that started in 73. And a lot of us from NOW, and I think from some other areas, would really supported them in getting started. Both for, because we had people who were used to doing speaking in front of crowds, or handing out leaflets, or picketing, or whatever was needed, and we also just had a group of women who were willing to work on the issue and support the issue. So we really did try to work with them to help support getting that effort off the ground. And it's hitting its what?
That was
40th. Its 40th anniversary is this year.
This year?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And describe your role more within how Women Employed was able to grow.
I was, I ended up speaking at a couple of the public meetings.
Mm-hmm.
I had, they were looking for people who actually worked in the loop.
Mm-hmm.
And I was standing there when someone pointed to me and said, "Don't you work in the loop? Why don't you do this?" Oh, okay. So I ended up being a spokesperson at least one or two of the meetings, And in fact, the first meeting that we had with the Chicago Chamber of Commerce and Industry, I was one of the spokespeople. I was, with another lady, and we did our little tag team, and exacted a promise from this gentleman to have a public meeting. And I remember he signed something and then tucked it under his pile of papers, and my job was to reach over and pull it out, which I did. That was fun. And then later, when we had the public meeting, I had a role in speaking. I wasn't as interested in keeping going with Women Employed, even though we certainly supported them for years and still go to a lot of their events. I really enjoyed my role in NOW and felt that that's where I wanted to be.
Right. And at one point in 1973, you said that World Books, your employer, had at some point 4 women from NOW and 1 from Women Employed, all working for them.
Well, they had, I may have the wrong amount here.
No, sorry.
It had the president of the Chicago chapter of NOW, the vice president of the Chicago chapter of NOW, that was me, the former president of the Chicago chapter of NOW, and the chair of Women Employed, all working there at the same time.
How did that impact your work environment?
Well, it made them very nervous, I think. It's hard to say in some ways, because this was a group of very educated people. And even though most of everyone that was in a position of authority was male, they knew that they had to support this movement. I don't think it made them comfortable. But I think they knew they had to tough it out. They knew that this was not something that was going to go away, and they had 4 very good workers here. They certainly weren't going to get rid of, but I think it made them nervous. And yet there were some changes that happened. I know that in our area, the senior art director started having meetings with representatives of the department to talk about issues and things that we needed to get done. I don't think he would have ever done that if there hadn't been an atmosphere of change in the department. He certainly didn't like it, but he tried.
Describe to me again the story of having to tell an art director, I don't know if this was the same art director, to take down a poster. And you were elected.
I was elected. He thought he was very funny. And he put up a poster in his office. It was a fairly common anti-women's movement poster, depending on how you looked at it. I mean, I guess you could have said, yeah, that's really funny, and just let it go. But it was a statue of a young woman in a miniskirt, or not a statue, a painting of a young woman in a miniskirt standing at a urinal with 2 other guys on either side of her. And actually it wasn't a painting, it was a photograph, but it was I'd seen it in a number of places. Well, he put this up in his office, and the women in the office were all offended, and not just ones who were overt feminist or would have even classified themselves as feminists. They just found it offensive. And as part of the art department one of the representatives to this group, I got elected with going into his office and telling him that the women were offended and to ask him to take it down. Well, he had a king-size fit, ripped it off the wall, walked into my office and tried to stuff it into my trash can, and I wouldn't let him put it in there. I don't know what happened to it, but he was very, very angry, and because he thought he was being funny. He just felt we didn't have any sense of humor, and I think he disbanded those meetings soon after that. It was too bad, because it was nice having the discussions, but as long as he wasn't challenged. But I don't think it ever really sunk into him what was offensive about the poster. But The women could have all told him it was.
How did it make you feel to be put or elected to sort of operate within that dynamic, or to have to be the front runner to deal with it?
Well, I think I felt pretty proud that people had faith in me that I would do it.
Right.
And that I could do it. So even though it made me very nervous, because this guy was, well, he was my boss's boss.
Right.
So that part made me very nervous, but I felt that I had a lot of support. And at that point, I don't think it ever occurred to me that he might fire me, because I don't think that anyone could say, that would put that down as a firing offense. But I knew that he had quite a temper, and there would be some display of that. But I managed to weather it. But I think I was proud to be asked, even if it made me very nervous.
Interesting. And back to NOW, could you describe to me the Ad Shamrock Committee and the St. Patrick's Day of 1973? Were you a part of that?
The St. Patrick's Day, the Chicago Irish Feminists for the Equal Rights Amendment was actually the brainchild of a wonderfully creative lady named Casey Kelly, who was also the author of a great deal of the feminist follies. She was just a wonderful playwright. She could write songs. She is extremely creative and Irish. And so she decided that, or she came up with the idea of us marching in the St. Patrick's Day parade as the Chicago Irish Feminists, and she put together a banner and got the permit, because you have to have the permit. And it was actually, she even did some research to find out that Richard Daley, this is the father, Richard the First, his mother had been a suffragette and had marched in suffragette marches. So we had several signs referring to the mayor and his mother being a suffragette, and had our banner and got our ERA yes signs, and for several years marched in the parade, and we had a wonderful time. It was Casey's really one of those wonderful women that has always amazed me, that with the range of her creativity and the fact that she was able to use it in for the women's movement is wonderful. I mean, I don't know that she would have had a chance to do put together plays. She's written plays and musicals since then, but certainly we were her her testing ground for a lot of material, and it was just a great opportunity for her to get to do her own creativity too.
When was the Feminist Follies? What do you remember? What year that first started?
I'm trying to think. We had.
We have a poster.
Well, no, I wish I did. When is this? This is this. Is there a year on this thing? I think this was. Okay, this was 73, 74, probably in 1975.
Okay.
It was, every year we celebrated August 26th, because that's the anniversary of the date women got the right to vote. So August 26th was our big fundraiser and our big event. And I think that would have been 75, and it was a lot of fun. Just some fun skits, some songs. Got together, a little chorus. We just had so much fun doing so much of this work.
Where were they held?
That first one was in a church. The next one, I think the next two were actually at Sauer's Restaurant, which was on the south side. I don't think Sauer's is there anymore. Wonderful old German restaurant, but it had a little stage, and and so then we'd have the event there, and it was just a lot of fun. I mean, it was a group of ladies just having a really good time, and men too. We had some wonderful men who were members of the chapter, and very, very good sports, and with a lot of creative material that covered the church, the ERA, the legislature, the governor, the mayor, the just anything going on in your life, general attitudes about women. There's a lot of material out there, and we had a lot of fun with it.
Why do you think those were important too, as opposed to just general rallies or protests?
Well, for one thing, they helped us raise some money, which was always important. But I think it's also important to have a good time.
Mm-hmm.
I think that we had a lot of clever people, and we needed to laugh at ourselves, and sometimes at the situations we were in. You can't hurt, sometimes you can't believe that what people say or what people's attitudes are, and you find it a bit unbelievable. So sometimes it helps just to make fun of it and just point up the absurdity of it. And a lot of the times you make some of your better points and get your message across a lot more directly if you're singing it or making a joke out of it. Sometimes it just really points up the absurdity of some of the arguments that were against the issues we were trying to promote.
And how many years did the Chicago Now chapter do that? You said 3?
At least 3, and
Okay.
it might have been 4. Right now it's starting to all run together. Yeah.
Describe to me the Sears a campaign against Sears, which I think really the focus really began in 1974.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me about that and the discredit card.
Oh, we were looking at the problem of discrimination in hiring and employment for women in retail in general, and the reason that now focused on Sears is that it was a national company. And that the problems, the discrimination that we were finding was national as well. It was not so much hiring, although there were other issues like the credit, and credit was a big one. But the hiring issues were often as simple as having buyer's assistants and assistant buyers, and one would be male and one would be female, and whatever was the male category was paid higher. They were doing basically the same work, but they got away with paying the women less because they said, well, it's a different job title, but it's the same job. And I know Sears wasn't the only one doing it, but still they were a national company, and there were now chapters nationwide, so it made sense to go after one of the biggest offenders when you could point out that the problem was really nationwide. And the one area that there were 2 specific demonstrations that I remember, especially because I got to do things for them. One was the Christmas time rally that dealt with credit, where we put together the discredit card, and we were giving it to a Mr. Lou Hall, who I think was the regional credit manager, just because women were having trouble getting credit in their own name at Sears. And on a December Saturday, we had one of our members dressed up as Ebenezer Scrooge, another one dressed up as Ms. Claus, and the chapter presented this discredit card, which I had put together, to Mr. Hall. He, of course, wasn't there, so Ebenezer Scrooge was there to accept it on his behalf. and we had a great time with that, and I think got some very good attention, because you got a lot of Christmas shoppers around, especially around Sears. And this was when the Sears was down on State Street. It's in a different building now. This was a little further south in the Loop, but it was very, very busy Saturday in December, and that was fun. And I think we got a lot of good attention. And I mean, we did several other actions having to do with the credit issue, but that was the most fun. And the other activity that the other action that we did that I really was involved in making the props for was the annual meeting of stockholders, which was at Prudential Plaza, and I think that was in 1975. And we had been leaked the hiring statistics for Sears. And I had a committee, but this was my design. I built a 7-foot model of the Sears Tower, painted it black, and we painted the statistics in white on each side of the tower. Put it on a little red wagon, because I don't think we had anything else to carry it in. And we picketed the front of the Prudential building and got some wonderful press. We got, in fact, we were on the national news the next morning. We were just thrilled. And rather singing and going around and, going around in circles. And it was just we were very, very pleased with the press. We were very pleased that we got the kind of attention we did, and we got a lot of good support from people who were just walking by on the street. So that's a great memory.
I don't know I can't remember if these photos were. But there's the Mrs. Claus.
Oh, yes.
And this is Eleanor Protas.
Oh, yes. Yes, we also, we did have the bank action. That was August 26th. Where I think that was the one where we went into the bank and we're trying to open up accounts, and then somehow, I mean, that one was a little confusing. But then somewhere it was announced that they weren't giving credit to women in their own name, and so we all just said, no, we won't have it, and we stomped out and had a rally outside. I think this credit card was a little bit more direct of an action.
Oh man.
Yeah.
Well, later in 1977, there was the more of a national women's meeting in Houston for the Houston Women's Conference. How did you feel Chicago? Where was your participation in that, if any, and how do you think Chicago was impacted by it?
I didn't get to go to it. I don't remember why I wasn't. I think there was something at work I couldn't go. It's funny. It's you at the time you know there's reasons you can't do things, and then later on you remember the thing, but not what kept you from going. So I don't remember what. I think the Chicago chapter of NOW had a good representation. I think there was also good representation from other NOW chapters in Illinois. I don't know what impact it had. I think that the fact that it was pretty amazing. I am sorry I didn't get to go. I think it would have been wonderful.
Well, that was also, so in 1977, the same year of the conference is when you became the Illinois NOW chapter president.
Right. I'm trying to remember when that happened. I think that actually was from 1976 to 77. It was just 1 year. And that was when we had the big rally in Illinois, the Rally for Equal Rights in May of 1976, and that took a lot of our effort that year. Was getting ready for that. We had organized a lot of buses going down to Springfield, and that was a wonderful experience. Just just getting off this bus and getting into this huge sea of people just headed for the Capitol was very, very moving and very, very exciting.
And by then, had there been a lot more now chapters opening up in various...
There had been chapters opening up in Illinois since the late 60s.
Okay.
There were a number of them in the suburbs. There were a lot downstate. And the state organization would meet once a month just to check in, see what was going on, what everyone was doing, and to try to organize an effort like this rally.
Oh.
And this also had a lot of national now involvement. There were people, a train of people came from the East Coast, and I remember standing in the train station with a couple of other people down on the platform, back when you could stand on the platform and wait for people. And in comes this train with ERAS across the front of the train. That was pretty amazing. I don't know how they managed that, but it was pretty amazing. And people started pouring off the train. And then a lot of the effort that was made was getting them housed and getting them bused down to Springfield. And but that was thrilling. That was I think the first time that there had been a national rally of this sort aimed for the Equal Rights Amendment that had people coming from all over the country. And
so you were not only organizing a lot of this with them, but also creating some of the graphics for...
I did not get to create this.
Oh, okay.
No. We had someone else do this. I love this, though. It's wonderful. Actually, there's a great poster that goes with that, too. But no, we had... We found a lot of young artists who were ready to start designing things, and I can't think of her name. But no, we had a lot of assistance from a lot of people. There were and people really worked very, very hard at pulling that together. But that was really more of a national and state effort. That was a group that was whose only focus was in working to get the ERA passed, and so we were just a part of that.
What were some of the difference between, especially having spent almost equal time then with the Chicago Now chapter and the Illinois chapter? What were some of the differences between the two?
Well, I loved Chicago Now. Chicago Now was my home, and there was some friction between the Chicago chapter and the state organization. I think that's not unusual for organizations in general, especially if you're looking at a downstate, upstate kind of thing. We were the oldest chapter in the state. We had the greatest number of members. We had the greatest number of resources. You have people, you're going to have money to do things. And I think there was some friction. In a way, I'm somewhat amazed I got elected, but I don't think anybody else ran, because I was from Chicago, and I think that at some point there were some distrust of of Chicago hogging all the glory or making all the decisions or whatever. There were a lot of talented women out there who were doing some very good things. It took a while to get comfortable working together, and I actually had a very good group of officers from downstate and from the suburbs. But after a year, it was clear to me that this was not probably the best place for me to be, and so I only served a year, and then went back to working in the Chicago chapter.
What were some of the negative aspects of some of these the women's movement conventions or organizing?
Negative aspects. Well, unfortunately were some. I think that what we experienced especially with trying to get the ERA passed in Illinois, and I think other states that had problems getting the ERA passed, is that women from other states where it had been easy had no concept of what we were up against politically. And I think that in general there is a prejudice that's got the East Coast and the West Coast as being more advanced or more politically astute, and that the rest of us in the middle are just not quite, called up to them, which I think is terribly untrue. Certainly our chapter was very politically sophisticated, and I don't mean electoral politics. I mean just understanding the workings of the organization and what that meant. But the fact that we could not get the ERA passed and was a big frustration for everyone. And at some point, when you can't fight, you can't get your enemies out there to move, sometimes you go start blaming each other. And I think there was a lot of blame. And it wasn't just for Illinois, it wasn't just for us, it was for, I think, any state that found itself in that position. But what had happened was that the ERA, passed quickly in states that were more liberal. And by the time some of the more conservative states got around to dealing with it, there was a great deal of opposition that had arisen. We had very, very strong opposition from Phyllis Schlafly and her group down in Alton. They were very, very well financed. There was a great deal of opposition from the Mormon Church. We were a lot of places, again, very well financed. We found ourselves up against more formidable enemies. We came extremely close to passing the RA in Illinois many times, but never with quite enough. And sometimes it was somebody who was really pro the bill got in a snit that day over something else. Their feelings got hurt over something else. A lot of it was just politics. And we often fell victim to that. And a lot of that came together in the conventions with we were trying to elect officers and for national conventions. And the first couple of conventions I went to were very polite. They were early. We got to convention in Philadelphia, and that really was, I was going to say it fell apart, but I think there was just a great deal of opposition. There were to any of our candidates, to any of our issues. To a certain extent, the Sears campaign was hurt by that because a lot of politics got in the way. There were people who wanted these offices because they could see the national implication of it. They wanted a national role, maybe as a stepping stone to something else. Maybe they just wanted to run NOW, but it got really nasty. Much more than I thought it would have. And a lot of that, I think, was because of the frustration of just things not getting done and not being able to move along, which was very, very sad, I think. But especially for someone who was still fairly new to all of this, it was very discouraging. And I was going to say frightening, but if you really love the organization and you want it to keep going, that kind of thing can be frightening. And especially when you don't quite understand the level of anger that's coming out. So that was a big disappointment. And eventually things settled down, and the rally, for instance, the Rally for Equal Rights in Illinois really did help to focus people's attention back to where it needed to be.
Right.
Which let's get back to the issue and not fuss at each other. And that did help. I think that really helped to move the organization ahead. But that kind of opposition came and went, and that kind of animosity came and went. And it is a big shame because it got in the way of getting work done.
Do you feel that, well, I was going to ask if you felt that there could have been anything done differently by certain organizations, perhaps organizations that were really well known nationally, or do you feel that just because there were so many avenues that it conflicted with a greater cause? Or
I mean, I'm sorry, what? I'm not sure I know what you mean.
Well, the organizations, more in reference to the ERA.
Yeah.
So do you feel like because of because of all the organizations trying to work with each other, do you feel like things could have been done differently that would have made the ERA more successful?
I keep thinking that if it had just passed faster, perhaps it would have worked. Because I think that's really what happened with a lot of the states, the East Coast states. I mean, after a while, there were some moves to undo the ERA in those states, to
Undo the ratification?
yes, to de-ratify.
Right.
And that's because in those states, the opposition had finally gotten itself together, and there were definitely moves to do that. And I think that was pretty educational to those folks who thought it was an easy thing. I mean, we all thought it was a no-brainer. How could anyone fight this? I think that's one thing, is people might be more cynical and more aware of the possibility of someone not seeing it as obvious as you do. I really think it was a surprise to us. The amount of opposition was a real shock, and usually for some really stupid reasons, but those stupid reasons seem to resonate with an awful lot of conservatives. And as I said, they had a lot of money. Certainly the conservatives, the antis, had more money than we did. Yeah. So I don't know what would have made it easier. I just know that there were some mischances where we came with just in a couple of votes, and somebody didn't show up that day, or they were mad about something else, and you think that there's going to be plenty of time. 7 years, you got 7 years to ratify. Surely we're going to get it done in 7 years, and then we got an extension. Surely we'll get it done in the extension, and it just got to be harder and harder.
Did you participate in the women's? The 1978, the ERA Extension March that was in Chicago?
I went to the one in Chicago. I didn't get to the one in D.C. There was one in D.C. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Tell me about your involvement with the Loop Center, YWCA.
I was on the board of the Y. This was after I left the position of president of the state chapter. The Loop Center Y was very supportive to women's organizations in Chicago, and really served as a home for a great number of organizations. Some, for Women Employed met there. Chicago Now certainly met there. Several rape crisis centers and other groups that didn't have a home used it as our meeting place for years. And I got the opportunity to serve on the board, and eventually served as the president of the board for about a year and a half, and very much enjoyed it. It was a great group of people. A very impressive group of ladies. Mm.
And then why did you return to? So when you left, when did you leave the the Illinois Now chapter? So you did return to Chicago Now in 1980?
I think it was 81.
81.
Memory is not what it is.
The years don't even have to be accurate.
Early 80s. A friend of mine became the president of the chapter, and she asked me if I would consider coming back and serving on the board with her, so I was her secretary. I just did it for a year, but it was a great year, and I enjoyed working with them. And that was the real end of the ERA push. So I was glad to get back and do it.
Yeah, and that was 1981, and the extension ended 1982. How did you feel when it failed after the extension?
Oh, so disappointed. So sad. In one hand, you could see that some gains were being made without it, and that a number of things that we'd been warned were going to happen if the ERA passed were happening anyway. Women being more women in the military, for instance, and women doing. I don't remember what else was the biggest hassle, but you could see that changes were coming, and some of the changes that we wanted, but still we were without that guarantee in the Constitution. And we were, I think, all very, very disappointed. I think it was difficult to keep an involvement for me in the women's movement after that, in that particular, in that kind of role, mostly out of exhaustion, I think.
Been 10 years.
Yeah, and
right.
so you're it's hard to keep up the momentum to go to meetings and to keep going towards a goal, and then to have it just end and not have success was very, very hard. I think on the Now chapter and on just women activists in the state in general.
Why did you decide to remain living in Chicago?
I have friends. I have. I mean, most of my really good close friends I have come to me through NOW or through work, and these folks are really my family. And I love Chicago. I originally planned to work my way west. I was going to spend a few years working in Chicago, and then maybe Denver, and then maybe San Francisco. And I hit Chicago and found NOW and found all these wonderful people, and really loved my job, and I settled in. I didn't want to go. So I'm very, very lucky to have found a place that has welcomed me this much and served me so well.
How did you get involved with the Woman Made Gallery?
I had heard about Women Made. I had a friend who also served with me on the board of Chicago Now back in the early 80s, who was on the board of Woman Made, and I was talking to her, and she invited me to come and see it and see if I would like to join the board. And I love the gallery. I love the whole idea of it, and the fact that it was there to support women artists and offer opportunities for women to exhibit art that who offered these opportunities to women who who might not have one otherwise, or would find it more difficult to find space. And I just found it a really extremely positive place for women, and something I wanted to be part of, so I joined the board.
Wonderful. Why do you feel like, or how do you feel that women, particularly in the 70s during the movement, women in the arts impacted the movement? Perhaps I should rephrase that. I could already see I kind of went backwards a little bit.
Yeah.
Do you feel, or how do you feel about the contribution of art to the women, like the graphic arts that you did, or the 7-foot Sears Tower? Do you feel that those helped impact it further?
Yes, I think so. I think anytime you can make something visual and have an image that sticks in someone's mind, tied with an issue or with a particular point you're trying to make, I think it just makes it a stronger point, makes it more valuable. I think in general, not just the kind of thing that we did, but the art done by the Women's Artists Collective of the Women's Liberation Union, gave us gave women an expression that they hadn't had before, and that was extremely valuable to us, and it was very welcome, and it was something that we really needed.
And the friend from the Women Made Gallery, was that something you two thought about too, in terms of how you approached the gallery? Do you feel that it was important for women to be represented in the art world more?
Absolutely. As an artist, and just as an art and as a supporter of the arts, you want any artist to be able to show their work and to be able to create. And if you feel that women are not being given the same opportunities as men, or that even that in a city like this it's difficult to find that avenue, it's hard to get started. A place that's going to give you not just an opportunity to show work, but help you put together your portfolio, give you critique of your work, help you become a better artist, help you become a professional artist, and which Woman Made does, I think is just invaluable. So,
how do you feel we can further keep opportunities alive for women in the art world?
Art world. Oh, more galleries like Woman Made would be nice. Supporting galleries like Woman Made. I think that there were several more galleries that were really women's galleries. I think at least one of them has gone under, but I think that more of them should spring up, and there should be more opportunities for people to show their work. And supporting them. I mean, these galleries are all nonprofits. They need money. It's sad, but that's what it comes down to, is that organizations that like this need support. And it's one thing to go and look at the artwork and admire it and be glad that you've had an opportunity to see it, but a lot of these groups just need financial support, and it's been a rough 4 or 5 years.
Yes. Give me a moment. I know. Yeah. Allergies. Tell me more about the organization, the Veteran Feminists of America.
VFA was, I don't know how long ago it was started, but it was started by a number of women. I think most of them had belonged to NOW nationally, who realized that they needed to preserve their experiences and in the women's movement of the late 60s and early 70s for posterity, and to encourage younger women to become involved in the movement and to keep the goals and the achievements of the women's movement alive and healthy. And they've been working towards that for a number of years. And I think the group itself is growing. I mean, I think they're getting more supporters, and certainly have had the opportunity to get out and have some and be public with their history.
That's all right.
Oh,
it seems to be they're trying.
You are going to edit this, aren't you?
No. Oh, that's okay. Hey, I forgot to record in the first 20 minutes.
I'm sorry.
Don't be sorry. Have some water.
I need some water.
It's allergies. Do you want to take a minute and think about anything maybe that during your years as an activist that we haven't talked about? Anything that I haven't touched upon?
I don't think so. probably.
Silence is allowed.
Silence is allowed.
Yes,
okay,
that's
good.
okay. It might even help me during transcription.
Okay. I think I've said a lot, but I think I keep using the word fun a lot. And I actually think that has been an important part of it for me, is that what the women's movement was exciting and enjoyable and often frustrating and sometimes very, very, could be discouraging too. But I feel that with all of the trials and tribulations, wonderful things got accomplished. And feeling that one was a small part of all of that is a wonderful feeling. If you can't point to one thing that says this is because of me, but you feel that you, as part of that group, led to that your work, that your effort led to some wonderful accomplishments, and that's just a wonderful feeling.
Yeah. How has your so you are still very close with many of the friends you made during those years.
Yeah.
Have any of them, have they only just grown? Has there been some that have kind of faded away, or?
Oh, sure. I mean, there are some people that I'd love to see again. I have no idea where they are. But the ones to whom I was the closest are still the ones to whom I am close. And I mean, a number of folks just have physically moved, and I just don't see them. Or maybe I'll see them once or twice a year. And I'm always happy to see them. But the closest friends are still the ones I rely on. And the people I know I could call in a pinch, and the ones who I have some of the best laughs with and the best memories.
Who are they?
One of them is Marianne Lupa, who was brought me in. She is probably my dearest friend. Betty Vadina, who was the membership chair of Chicago Now back when I started, and is another one of my dearest friends. Those are two of the biggies. I don't see Darlene Stilley, who was the first chair of Women Employed, a lot. She's retired and moved to Michigan, but every once in a while I like to hear from her.
That's wonderful. I mean,
and
Marianne brought you in.
Yes, she did.
So the first person, really, you met in Chicago.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yes.
Yeah. And she's just been a staunch friend and a sister, really a sister, for 40 years.
What would you say your current status as an activist is?
Semi-retired. Well, I'm more involved in trying to support women in the arts, and so my current activity is as a board member for a women's nonprofit dance group. And it's not quite the same feminist bent that certainly Woman Made was, but it's still supporting work of women, and I'm happy to be involved in keeping that effort going too.
What do you feel was distinctive about the Chicago women's movement during the 1970s? Or 1970s through the early 80s?
I think that they were very focused very smart, definitely action-oriented. There were some areas that were more involved in lifestyle changes and the societal changes. But Chicago Now was always interested in the action orientation and setting a goal and getting things done. And I think that's what appealed about them to me. It wasn't just talking about theory or there were plenty of places that did consciousness raising and book discussions and things like that. This was a group that was working on issues and very focused on issues, and I think that was just the right place for me. And I think they were very, very good at what they did, and just and I think that was in some ways unusual, and that to keep that focus.
How do you think your activism transformed you as an individual?
Oh, I grew up a lot. I think it helped me be more sure of myself. It led me to try things I would have never thought to try before. I certainly, things like standing up in front of a group and talking, or handing out leaflets on the street, or going to public meetings and holding a microphone and making a statement or making a speech or even asking a question. All of that, I think, helped me grow a great deal as a person. Having responsibility for a committee, learning how to pull together a group of volunteers, which is very different from working with people. Working with volunteers is a totally different dynamic, because no one is being paid to be there. They're there because they care about what they're doing and because they feel like they're getting something accomplished. And it's a totally different responsibility. And that too was a wonderful, wonderful experience, and a big growth experience for me.
How do you feel your activism transformed your immediate community or society at large? Some of these questions might sound repetitive, and if you do feel you've answered it, you're welcome to.
My immediate community?
Yeah.
I'm not sure how to answer that. I've got to figure out what part of my immediate community I might, other than my group at work. I do feel the activism made me better at work. I think that it was also a wonderful experience for my mother, who told me she was very proud of what I did. It was very different from her experience, of course, but she had seen how hard her mother's life was, and really felt that what I was doing was going to help people like her mother down the road. And to have her give me that kind of response was really wonderful and very, very valuable to me. And
how did your father and your siblings respond to your active work?
My father was very proud of it. My older brother was a little bit more conservative. I think he had no clue really what I was doing. He knew, but it wasn't anything that he was. It wasn't that he wasn't uncomfortable with it. I just don't think it touched his life that much. My younger sister was, I think, somewhat maybe a little puzzled by it, but by and large supportive. But it just wasn't her thing. She wasn't certainly going to go out and do anything similarly, and I don't know that my younger brother knew what I was doing either. Part of it was that I was so far away from any of them. You know,
Yeah.
they were all on the East Coast and I was in Chicago, so I wasn't, so they weren't there to be part of what I was doing. Yeah.
Crack sometimes, sorry. What regrets do you have from that time period?
Regrets? I think that there are some things I wish I'd gone to, like International Women's Year and some other events I wish I had taken part in. I may have chosen not to go because of work or something else going on in my life, and think back afterwards, say I really wish I'd been a part of that particular thing. That I would have liked that energy. I would have liked to have had that experience. I probably have some other personal regrets, but those are probably the only ones for the movement. I think that I stopped major involvement when I needed to, that I just couldn't keep up that energy, and I don't know that I regret not to keep going with it, but I'm sure there was a lot I could have done that I didn't think about. I just know that a time came and I couldn't keep doing it.
If you're comfortable, what were some of your personal regrets?
I shouldn't say I may regret. There are times I regret that I didn't have children, but I never met anyone I wanted to have children with, and I wasn't one of those folks brave enough to go out and find someone and just have a child on my own or adopt. So that's in hindsight, that's a regret at this point, but it's not one that is overwhelming. It's just every once in a while I think it would be nice to have had children. You can't do everything, and I seem to be having a good time while I was working, but just you reach a point and you think, well, I missed that particular opportunity. That's probably the biggest.
What would you say, how has your definition of feminism changed over the years?
I was trying to think if it had, and I'm sure it has. I think...
Or did you ever have a definition?
I think that when I first started working at NOW, I felt you were a feminist if you agreed with all these positions and attitudes of the women's movement, and I think that I don't know if I believe that you had to believe in the whole package, but I think that's where I was. Is that there was, if it was feminist, and you were supposed to buy into all of it. I think that issues have changed, and that women have changed and society has changed. And for one thing, the society has incorporated a lot of these attitudes. And so I think that feminism nowadays is a belief that women can do anything and should be able to do anything they choose to do if they have the talent, without restriction put on them by governments, by religions, or by society. And I think that we've come so far in what we think is a woman's right and her due, and the things that the restrictions, the roadblocks that women faced when back when I was 20 would be a total shock to a young woman now who's 20 who could not believe that those restrictions were ever there. So maybe I have to come up with a new definition of what feminism is, and I think it would be that feminism is just the belief that a woman can do whatever she wishes if she's got the talent.
Yeah.
And I think that's a pretty good definition right there. We all are restricted by where we're born, what opportunities there are for us. All people are restricted by the talents with which we're born, the opportunities that happen to us that that are right there for us. But the ability to go out and make new opportunities, get our own, get the education that we can afford. We may be restricted by money, but there's no one saying you can't go to this school, or you can't. That we have a limit on the number of women we're going to let into this class, or simply that girls don't do that.
Yeah.
So, because nowadays girls do a lot.
Yeah.
And I think that if we take feminism as just a belief in our own possibilities, then that's a good definition.
What do you feel women? What are the biggest challenges you think women are still facing today?
A lot of the challenges I see facing women, facing women worldwide, not just in this country. And a lot of them are the religious restrictions of certain countries where women are, you see women being kept from education or having some freedom of movement. There are a lot of places where those things exist. In this country, I think it's more a question of whether there's danger of backsliding, of losing some of the rights that we've won for ourselves. And I think it's more a danger that that people aren't vigilant, that we can lose these rights. I think that's I don't see any danger of some of that right now, except perhaps the legal abortion issue. But sometimes things, societies backpedal, and I think we just have to be vigilant that if there is a right and a privilege that we value, that we need to make sure that we can hold on to it.
What are, off the top of your head, some great feminist leaders and role models currently today? Do we have any?
Currently, I'm trying to remember who's still alive. Oh, terrible. Gloria Steinem's the only one I can think of, because she is so prolific and is still writing and is still speaking. That's probably the only one that comes to mind right at the moment. I'm sure there are many others.
It's okay. The last question is, why did you agree to do this interview?
I think it's I'm just very encouraged that that you are willing to make this effort to find out about what happened, and to record and keep these memories, and to note that we went through the efforts we went through to try to make life better for young women, or for women of any age. But that's very encouraging to me that someone cares enough to ask.
That's good. Any final words or thoughts?
No, but thank you.